You're talking about limitations such as with the spitter not being able to walk, running into situations like that, not even to do with visual effects, but more to do with operations. I'm just kind of curious for you, do you find that limitations, constraints, things like that really help people thrive in those situations versus carte blanche, having infinite opportunity?
I absolutely think having limitations is what gets artists, whether they're effects artists, directors, whomever, to do their best work. When they have to be inventive, I sort of feel like when you have everything at your disposal, there's a lack of discipline that comes with that, and a lack of inventiveness that comes with it. You know, we all know I didn't work on Jaws or anything like that when Steven did that movie, but we all know the stories of the things he did when those animatronics weren't working and the way he cut around it. And it's much scarier. The stuff you don't see but you think you see is the great stuff in that movie. And I've worked on a lot of movies at ILM over the years, and sometimes directors, even Steven at times, would have so much stuff at their disposal, and they made their weakest films, I think, at those points in times when they have to kind of think things up and be inventive. I'm thrilled that visual effects now is so important to almost every movie that gets made. Almost every film has something in it, and some films have so much in it. But I do feel at times I miss some of the practical things we used to do and the workarounds we used to do and the kind of sleight of hand we needed to do to pull things off. It was a little more magical, and people are doing such great work now that it's really difficult to criticize it. And I'm not criticizing it, but I do feel like the ability to kind of do almost anything you can imagine in the computers, taking a little bit of an edge off imagining how to tell your story well without quite as much of that support and without quite as many of those tools.
I always think that the shows that I'm bidding, the ones that aren't just, let's just do it all in CG. It's about like, how are we going to pull this shot off? Okay, well, that's all practical. We can, do some stuff over here and there, but those are the fun ones to kind of look at the payoff.
CG work has gotten so superb that people could have a different opinion about this and be totally valid. But I've always found the shows that are a mix, that have a bit of practical, a bit of miniature, a bit of CG. There's something about them that make them feel more realistic to me, because I think there's more grounded reality. Things are more rooted in reality if you've got miniatures or some practical stuff. The sleight of hand's a little bit better because you can't pick up on the CG as much when it's a mix of things in there. So I like it when I see that, when people have taken the effort to kind of go through and try to mix up the approaches a bit.
I'd love to talk a bit about your transition to Pixar, but for that, I was just kind of curious if there's any particular projects or stories that really kind of stand out to you during your tenure at ILM.
The Jurassic Park transition and navigating, Phil getting taken off that movie. I ended up being one of the people to have that conversation with him. I'm not sure why exactly, because the highly paid producers on the movie probably should have, but I somehow ended up with that particular task. I've mentioned a bit about The Abyss and Always as being sort of so emblematic of the kind of the two halves of the effects world at that point in time. We had a lot of movies go through, but around the time of Jurassic Park, of course, we also did FORREST GUMP. And I look at that as, a kind of an equally important film to Jurassic in its use of, I'll call invisible effects, we call them supporting effects or whatever. I think we replaced about 100 skies in that movie to kind of create the mood that Bob did, that they'd be too blue and sunny sometimes, and he needed to be a little more oppressive and dour. Obviously, there's mouth morphine stuff and so forth that happens in that, but there's just a lot of visual effects in that film. They're there to serve a different purpose. We removed Gary Sinise's legs so he could play the legless Dan character. I kind of felt like it was the first time I really saw visual effects help an actor perform. It made his character possible and made him, he was superb at figuring out how to do stuff so that when we did the leg removal, it seemed, very authentic and genuine. But I think of that movie, you think of Jurassic Park, and you think of that film, and it's almost like going back to, the roots of cinema. Méliès on the one hand and the brothers on the other hand, kind of they're making these realistic films, and Méliès is making these fantastic films. And so it was an interesting time to be there and kind of go through that transition from, photochemical, photographic to digital, and being there at that time and seeing the different forces and influence. And it was such a small industry back then. ILM was the biggest company at the time, even when we only had 400, 500 people there. And now that's, there's so many huge companies out there and facilities doing work now. Is quite a thing to say.
Yeah, I think before you have, your top 5, and now it's almost every studio is globalized in some shape or fashion if they've been around for more than a decade. Yeah.
Different time indeed. We used to talk and say, like, one day every film will be using stuff like this, and then you get down the road a little bit, you kind of go like, careful what you wish for.
Yeah, I can agree there.